Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Grad School Chronicles. Today is a very exciting day because I finally received my prescription sunglasses. But what's even more exciting is that today is also the first day of me officially being a PhD candidate. And I wanted to talk to you all about my experience of going through the candidacy exam. Before I upset too many people, I think I'll stick to regular glasses for the indoors use. Alright, I think that's probably much better. Candidacy, or in my case, qualifying exam. It's probably worth starting off by defining what the hell this thing actually is. Well, as the name suggests, it's an exam where you get tested, but it's kind of an exam that tests everything that you know in order to find out whether or not you're a suitable candidate to be transferred into a PhD program or to start in the PhD program anew, I guess. And it's a really intimidating way to define this exam and to think about it, especially when you're trying to prepare for one. So I found that it's much better mentally to think of this exam as the one that tests whether or not you have the necessary skills and the necessary tools in order to be successful in a PhD program. Probably makes the most sense to begin by talking about where this candidacy examination journey begins. And your mileage may vary based on your program, but for me, in the chemistry program at the University of Calgary, the whole preparation and the beginning of the exam really starts from the so-called pre-candidacy meeting. And this is when the student who would like to transfer into the PhD program or would like to start in the PhD program tells their committee that they indeed would like to do so. The point of that meeting is to let your committee know what your plans are in terms of where you want to take your research and how it's going to make sense to do a PhD with whatever project or projects that you would like to do for the next few years. And the job of the committee is to give you an initial kind of guidance onto what kind of material they think would be suitable for you to study in order to prepare for that candidacy exam. Now, it's worth noting that this meeting takes place for me it was over half a year before the actual exam. I think the latest it can happen is something like 8 or 9 weeks before the candidacy exam. So keep in mind that this is way before your actual exam, which means whatever information you receive at this point is really preliminary. Don't get me wrong, this approach works really well on paper. Because the next milestone in this candidacy process is to write up a research proposal to be given to your committee. So it makes sense for your committee to give you some guidance onto what kind of literature you might be interested in to review in order to write a solid research proposal. However, at the same time, with the limited knowledge that your committee has about your ideas for your research at that point, take whatever literature they give you to study with a grain of salt. I was given a list of about 10 topics, out of which I didn't read 5, just plain and simple, because they were not something that I was interested in pursuing whatsoever, so I didn't even bother. And the other 5 were things that I could have probably found on my own. So again, your mileage may vary. And on paper it does sound good, so I think it just depends on where you are in your own head in terms of how far you've planned your research and how developed your ideas are at that point. From there on, the game is on, and your job is to write a solid research proposal. And I would argue that the research proposal is the most important part of the candidacy examination process. Unlike the reading list that you would receive from your committee members in the pre-examination meeting, the proposal is truly what is going to serve as a guide for how your actual exam is going to go. At the point of writing my research proposal, I was struggling between finding time to study and to write. And I think now that I've been through this whole process, I shouldn't have worried about it too much, and I should have just concentrated on writing, because honestly, all of the studying that I did doesn't even come close to being as useful as the things that I've read in order to develop a very solid research proposal. And what I mean by a solid research proposal is one that will, first of all, be easy to follow for your committee members. I really think it is not a smart idea to try and showcase every single aspect of your knowledge in a research proposal. Save that for actual examination. Instead, write a research proposal that is going to flow well from one section to another, that's going to be referencing important literature in your field, that's going to give a very solid background for your committee members in order to understand what it is exactly that you're after, and the one that's showcasing that you're going to be making good use of the resources that you have available in your laboratory or institution as a whole. There is really so much to say about writing a good research proposal that I think I will save further discussion about it for either a future video if you request it, or for any comments that you might want to leave that I will promise you I will go through and answer to the best of my ability. But I cannot stress it enough. Put in the effort to make your proposal understandable. That's the number one priority. If your committee understands your proposal and can follow through with the ideas you present in the proposal, they will give you questions during the exam which are more discussion based, which are going to be easier and more fun to answer, rather than fundamental questions which you clearly have the right or wrong answer, which, you know, they're a hit and miss. You can never study enough to know every single thing. So it sucks if you have to say that you simply don't know the answer to a certain question. Whereas with the discussion questions, there's a lot more room to rationalize and to come up with a logical answer which your committee will appreciate. One last thing about the proposal: keep in mind it is a limited resource. You have some kind of limit on the number of pages that you can write or the number of sections which you can include. Now for me, the proposal was due exactly 1 month prior to the actual exam date, and upon submission of the proposal, it was truly a crunch time in terms of studying. I think at that point it is very, very important to realize that the proposal which you submitted to your committee is pretty much the only resource that your committee has to go off of in order to come up with questions for your exam. And realizing that has helped me greatly in terms of deciding how to divvy up my time during the studying sessions. I can say that I've probably spent only about 20% of all the time that I have studied on reviewing fundamentals. With that said, I knew that my fundamentals were pretty good. I remembered a lot of things from my undergrad, so that helped quite a bit. But still, 80% of the time that I spent studying were really allocated to studying from my own proposal. The best advice that I got from my colleague Nicola was that I should be able to rationalize and answer questions about every single word which I wrote in my proposal. And that, I think, was a very, very effective strategy for studying. I will give you a very quick example. The very first sentence in my research proposal was that oxygen is inarguably the single most important molecule that sustains the majority of life as we know it. My proposal was a physical chemistry study, and it went into depth into different nanoscience aspects, different spectroscopy aspects, and it had very little, if at all, to do with biology and life. I used that very first sentence simply as a catchphrase, in a sense, in order to make the proposal a little bit less dry and a little bit more interesting to read. But I kid you not, the question which I got during my exam was whether or not there are life forms which can sustain themselves without oxygen, and if I could name some. Right, I mean, it doesn't get sillier than that. Every single word that you write in your proposal is up for grabs for potential questions. Overall, I can definitely say that studying for the candidacy exam required me to pull every single bit of skill which I have learned in my undergrad in terms of study habits together into a very condensed short period of time in order to get myself to feel confident and feel at least somewhat ready for the exam. And I can tell you for sure, even the minute before my actual exam, I still didn't feel like I was ready for it. And from everybody who I've talked to about their experience of going through the candidacy, told me that it was the same way for them. So don't be discouraged by the fact that you're feeling like it's never enough. And I mean, that's what science is about. You can always ask another question. No matter what argument you make, you can just keep going deeper and deeper. Realize that at some point, things that you might be studying are far away reach from your committee for them to not dare you to ask you a question about them. Because if the committee asks a question which is fundamental knowledge, they need to know the answer in order to evaluate how you answer that question, right? So the more niche you get, the deeper you dig, the less are the chances of your committee actually asking these questions. And it's a little bit discouraging, but think about it as building a puzzle, like a jigsaw puzzle. Your idea, your main idea which you're proposing, is just a few pieces in that jigsaw puzzle. And imagine that they are just, scattered across the whole board. So in order to build the whole picture of knowledge, you need all the other pieces of puzzles. And I don't know how this analogy came about, but somehow it makes sense in my head. Think about filling all the little gaps in your knowledge and in between the things which you're talking about, mentioning, proposing, in order to have as much of that picture at your disposal during the exam. And this should go without saying, but remember to keep track of your own well-being during this stressful time of preparing for the candidacy. I definitely felt like my moods would swing from completely hating my life to being very happy about the place where I'm at within the span of the day, within the span of a few hours sometimes. And all I can say really is just take breaks. Take breaks in your studying hours in order to let yourself relax a little bit. You will sink a lot more information that way anyways. I cannot lie, the preparation time was not fun. It was very stressful, and you should expect that. But just try to find some kind of balance, whatever it may be, in order to stay on top of things. I personally found it relaxing and somewhat joyful, weirdly enough, thinking about what the hell am I doing, like why am I doing this, and just not trying to kind of build that thought up without really answering it, but actually asking myself the question and trying to come up with a rational answer. I mean, I'm the one who wants this, right? Why do I want this? And I enjoy learning a little bit about philosophy, and one of the things I came across is works by Albert Camus, who the only really book that I'm familiar with from Camus is The Myth of Sisyphus. And in that book, essentially, Camus makes a very powerful argument that we must imagine Sisyphus happy. And in case you don't know the myth of Sisyphus or the character of Sisyphus, it is a man who his whole life, I guess, would push a giant boulder up a mountain only to watch it roll back down to the bottom. He would then return to the bottom and push the rock up the mountain again, only to watch it roll back down. And again, Camus' argument is we must imagine Sisyphus happy. And I found, for me personally, that was really a driving force to carry on and to push myself, go through those periods when I absolutely did not want to look at any more chemistry and study anything else. But yeah, that's just me. I really wish you to find something that will keep you going. Maybe it's music, maybe it's art, maybe it's literature, maybe it's TV, maybe it's something on the internet. Whatever it is, don't think you're wasting time by wasting a little bit of time. It's gonna keep you going, and it's gonna pay off in the long run. And finally, the actual candidacy exam. It may vary depending on the program that you're in and the department and the institution, but I will just tell you what the exam looked like for me. Essentially, on April 18th of 2018, at 1 p.m., I arrived to the room where I had my exam. My committee members were there, and so was my supervisor. I came into the room briefly. I knew everybody on my committee. I knew the neutral chair, so there wasn't much for me introducing myself. And I pretty much almost immediately was asked to leave the room in order for my supervisor to give, I guess, some kind of formal introduction to the kind of progress that I have made so far in my research to maybe the extracurricular activities that I have done, maybe the awards that I have received. I wasn't there, I can't tell you, but that's what I guess I gathered from that time period. And it is also the time when the committee decides the order in which they are going to ask questions. So the actual exam consisted of 15-minute question slots allocated to each committee member. And they would go one after another for 1 hour, and then we took a very short bathroom break, and we came back to the room and took another hour of question period. And the actual exam for me was truly not a test of my fundamental knowledge. It was not a test of my chemistry skills. The feeling I got was really that the committee was probing the extent of my ability to apply my knowledge. So a lot of the questions were discussion based. There were a few questions which were fundamental. Those came mostly at the beginning of the exam, and then essentially all the questions were a little bit of back and forth between me and the committee member who was asking the question. And yeah, they truly felt like kind of having a conversation about something very focused. And that was both good and bad. It was a little bit frustrating when the questions were kind of going nowhere and they felt like there was no end to it. And that's again where I got that idea of kind of that knowledge puzzle. The committee member would start off with asking me something, and I would give them that initial piece of the puzzle, and they would carry on with the questions related to their original in order to kind of find out how far can I rationalize things and how much of that picture I can present to them. The way in which the exam was designed was definitely helpful in the sense that I knew that from the start of the first question, in 15 minutes, it will be over, and it's going to be the next person asking me questions, and they will not follow up on the previous kind of discussion that I've had. So there's a couple of times when I really was looking at the clock, just waiting for that 15-minute mark to hit, and just take a breath and move on to the next thing. A few general tips for the exam itself that I can give is, first of all, answer the question which you're being asked. Don't feel too worried about giving a short answer. The committee can always follow up with you, as has happened to me many times during the exam, but you don't know how far that will go. So if you spit out all the information you know right away, that kind of, any follow-up question you would get on that runs your risk of not being able to answer it. There's honestly a couple of times when my answer to the question was literally yes or no, right? If the person asking me, wasn't satisfied, they asked me why, and I would talk about it, and sometimes they didn't, right? Sometimes they were happy enough to just get that yes or no answer, and that's really all they wanted to hear. Another tip is be confident in your answers. Now, there is a fine line between being confident and being cocky, and I definitely do not recommend you to get cocky with your committee. That's really not the time and place to do that. But be confident. Whenever you answer a question, you know, just act like you know it, because chances are you do know it and you have no reason to doubt your answer yourself. If the committee is not happy with the answer, they won't get upset, they won't, punish you on the spot or anything like that. They will just tell you, oh, like, I'm not sure about this answer, can you maybe think about it more? And then you know that, oh well, something went wrong, and you can rationalize one way or the other. And also, be confident in the cases when you have made a mistake as well. Just own up to it, and just tell them like, oh, I'm sorry, like I didn't consider that. I had a couple of things in my proposal which I just didn't catch when I wrote it. For instance, I had at some point wrote a phrase that the data will be fitted to the equation, blah blah blah, and the question I got, well, oh, is that ethical? And I didn't understand the question at first, but eventually we got there, and essentially you don't fit data to equations, you fit equations to data, right? Data is, so to speak, sacred, whereas the equation is what you really manipulate. So little bits and pieces like that, just own up to it, showcase that you are indeed able to be rational and be logical about things, even if it's something that you've mistakenly thought was correct at first. Now, if you can, another handy tip is to use the board as much as you can. First of all, that gives you some time to think while you actually write something on the board, and second of all, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Draw a diagram when you can, simple schematic. Even if your answer does not require you to draw a picture, you might find it useful, and certainly it wouldn't hurt you to use the board in order to just manipulate ideas and show that one thing leads to the next, and this thing is what matters, or whatever it may be. One last thing, don't be afraid to clarify the question which you're being asked. We all think on different frequencies, and that includes your committee. In my exam, I can tell you every third question or so, I asked for a rationalization or a justification, because I simply couldn't make the connection between whatever was discussed or whatever I'm proposing and what the committee member is actually asking me. So just ask them nicely, could you please clarify that, or just tell them, I'm not sure what you mean by that. And even to the point where you can go ahead and tell them, I'm really not sure how to start answering this, could you point me in the right direction, right? The point of the exam is not to fail you, really, and that's really important to understand. The point of the exam, again, is to make sure that you can be successful in a PhD program. And the job of the committee is not to fail you, it is to help you. So keep that in mind. Well, after the exam was complete, once again I was asked to leave the room and shut the door behind me. And that's probably the most nerve-wracking or whatever time, because that is the time when the committee votes whether or not you passed or you failed the exam. And I mean, chances are you would know even before they tell you whether or not you passed or failed, right? Like with many exams, you can tell yourself whether or not you did good or bad. In my case, at that point, I was pretty confident that things went fairly well. And the committee voted. I was asked to come back to the room, and I was announced a decision by my supervisor. The decision was positive, so everybody congratulated me. They expressed some comments. They wished me good luck. It was very nice and sweet, and yeah, that was pretty much the end of it. After signing some paperwork, things were over. Yeah, that's candidacy. I wish you the very best of luck from the bottom of my heart if you're going through the candidacy. I don't know you. I don't know whether or not you'd make a good scientist, let's be honest, but I wish you the very best of luck to find a way to push yourself and come to a realization that indeed you're capable of achieving this, and you're capable of moving further forward in your program. Whether or not your committee ends up agreeing with you or not, it matters, but it doesn't matter. I think the process itself was, getting over the process itself was more rewarding than the decision that was made at the end. I can tell you that completely honestly. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Grad School Chronicles. I will try to get back on schedule with new episodes, a lot of ideas, a lot of things that I would like to chat about, and to present some fun things, some more serious things, all about the grad school experience. So stick around. Feel free to comment down below with any questions you have, any suggestions for videos. If you don't feel comfortable, the link to an email that this YouTube account is linked to is going to be in the description of this video. Don't hesitate to reach me. I can't promise to write an essay answer for you, but I will certainly try my best to help you out. And if there is a lot of questions, maybe I'll do an FAQ kind of video, because I know from myself that I had a ton of questions, which at this point I'm likely forgetting some about this whole process. Thank you very much. I will see you in the next episode. Take care.